Dawn does not arrive gently in this place. It seeps in, thin and colorless, through a slit of a window no wider than a man's hand. The stone walls hold the night's cold as if reluctant to let it go, their surfaces slick with moisture that beads and slides like sweat. Somewhere within the house, iron scrapes against stone. A key turns. The sound is deliberate, final, not the locking of a prison, but the opening of another ordinary day. She wakes before her name is spoken. Her body has learned the hours better than any bell. The pallet beneath her is nothing more than straw pressed flat by years of sleep and waking, its faint sweetness long replaced by the sour scent of breath and damp wool. Her fingers ache as she curls them, joints stiff from cold and labor. She pulls her cloak closer, feeling the rough weave catch against her skin, and sits up slowly, careful not to wake the others who sleep packed together like stored grain. The air tastes of smoke that never fully leaves. Tallow from last night's candle still clings to the room, mixed with the smell of old food and human closeness. She crosses herself, fingertips brushing forehead, chest, shoulder, whispering words taught to her as a child. Latin syllables memorized but not understood. The prayer is not for grace or joy. It is for continuity, for the day to pass without drawing God's attention too sharply. Her feet meet the dirt floor. It is cold, but not as cold as the world outside these walls. That knowledge brings a strange comfort. She ties her hair back with a strip of cloth darkened by use, slips her feet into worn leather shoes stiff with yesterday's frost, and steps into the passageway where the light is dimmer still. Outside, the town is already awake, not bustling, not alive in any joyful sense, but stirring like a body that never fully rests. Smoke rises from low roofs, each plume carrying the promise of heat and the reminder of scarcity. The streets are narrow, packed earth-slick with last night's waste. She lifts her hem as she walks, careful where she places her feet. There is no shame in filth here, only in carelessness. At the corner, the barber surgeon has set up his bench. A boy sits rigid, eyes wide, hands knotted in his tunic. His mother stands behind him, one hand heavy on his shoulder, the other gripping a rosary so tightly the beads press red into her skin. The barber hums softly as he sharpens his blade. Bloodletting is routine, as common as bread. The boy's illness is vague. Headaches, bad dreams, a temper that flares too quickly. Bad humors, they say. Too much blood makes a body restless, sinful. The blade flashes. The boy cries out, a sound sharp enough to cut the morning air. Straw beneath the bench darkens as blood spills, steaming faintly in the cold. No one intervenes. No one questions. This is care, administered with steel. She does not look for long. Looking too closely invites thoughts that cannot be fed or clothed. She moves on toward the well, where other women gather, their silhouettes hunched, faces wrapped against the chill. They exchange nods rather than words. Speech is saved for what matters, and this hour belongs to labor. The rope is rough against her palms as she helps lower the bucket. It creaks in protest, fibers groaning as they bear the weight. When the bucket rises again, it smells faintly of iron and something older, something that does not belong in water. She knows this smell. Everyone does. It is the smell of sickness waiting patiently. Still, she drinks. The water is cold enough to sting her teeth. Dysentery, fever, the slow wasting sickness that empties bodies from the inside out. These are known dangers, but thirst is immediate, demanding, unforgiving. A bell tolls from the church, its sound heavy and measured. Prime. The hours are not hers to choose. They belong to God, to the Lord, to the bell that divides a day like a blade. The sound rolls over the rooftops, stitching the town together in shared obedience. As the sun lifts higher, she is called to the church porch. A body lies there, laid out on planks, wrapped in linen thin as memory. The face is pale, mouth slack, eyes closed by hands that knew the gesture well. Death does not wait for ceremony here. It arrives too often, too casually. The corpse smells faintly sweet already, decay beginning its quiet work. She kneels and pours cold water over the body, her hand steady, impersonal. This is a neighbor she passed in the street, a man whose name she knew only because it was spoken when rents were due. She wipes his skin clean, smoothing the cloth over his face, tucking it beneath his chin. Flies buzz, persistent, drawn by what is coming. She shoos them away without thinking. As she works, she wonders, not for the first time, who will do this for her? Who will wash her hands, straighten her limbs, close her eyes before they cloud? The thought is not frightening, only factual. Death is a task like any other, waiting its turn. By midday, the market is open. Bread is sold from baskets, loaves dark and heavy, bulked with peas, husks, and sometimes chalk to stretch the grain. She buys what she can afford, fingers pressing into the crust to judge its worth. It smells sour but edible. Hunger has taught her to be grateful for textures others would refuse. A butcher hacks at a carcass nearby. Flies thick around his table. Blood runs in thin channels toward the gutter. Children watch, unflinching, learning without instruction where meat comes from. The butcher's hands are red to the wrist. He wipes them on his apron and laughs at a joke she does not hear. In the afternoon, she tends to her own small tasks. Mending, scrubbing, carrying. Each movement wears into her bones, shaping her body around necessity. There is no moment when she is not aware of her physical form, its limits, its aches, its small betrayals. A cough lingers in her chest. She ignores it. Everyone does, until they cannot. When the light begins to fade, she returns to the church again. Another body has been brought in, this one smaller. A child, wrapped carefully, as if care might undo what has already happened. The priest murmurs prayers, his voice tired, cadence practiced. The words promise resurrection, reunion, joy beyond suffering. She listens, but her attention drifts to the child's shoes placed neatly beside the bier. They are worn at the heel, toes scuffed from play. Someone will claim them later. Nothing is buried that can still be used. As evening settles, candlelight takes over where the sun retreats. Smoke gathers beneath the rafters, stinging eyes, blackening beams. She eats in silence, tearing bread with hands still rough from the day. The taste is dull, comforting in its familiarity. Around her, others eat too, chewing slowly, conserving energy. Outside, rats move freely, bold in the dim. They slip along walls, noses twitching, masters of the spaces humans neglect. No one chases them. They have learned it is useless. Disease travels with them, invisible and patient. When night finally claims a town, it does so without tenderness. Doors are barred. Fires are banked low. The darkness presses close, thick with sounds. The scuttle of small bodies, the coughs of sleepers, the distant cry of someone dreaming badly. She lies down once more on her pallet, straw rustling beneath her weight, before sleep takes her. She thinks of the day as a whole, of blood spilled to cure illness, of water drunk despite its danger, of bodies washed and wrapped as routinely as laundry. These are not extraordinary events. They are the shape of life itself, repeated until they feel inevitable. Silence settles, heavy and complete. In that silence, the practices of the day echo softly, like prayers spoken too often to retain their meaning. Sleep comes not as comfort, but as surrender. A brief forgetting before the key turns again, and the world demands its rituals once more. The kitchen smells of iron and dampness before she even reaches it. Dawn has already slipped between the timbers, brushing the floorboards with a pale light that reveals the grit ground into cracks. Smoke coils lazily from the hearth, thick with last night's fire, carrying the odor of boiled cabbage, animal fat, and the faint tang of sour milk. A girl kneels near the hearth, her fingers busy with a task that is at once intimate and necessary, the picking of lice from her younger brother's hair. The small insects cling stubbornly, their bodies slippery under her fingernails, crushed and discarded with a quiet, resolute cruelty she has learned to accept as care. She does not speak. The sound would shatter the fragile rhythm of the morning. Silence here is the first courtesy of labor. Her mother stirs the pot, a heavy iron cauldron that trembles with every motion, bones simmering to extract marrow and sustenance. The foam that rises on the surface is skimmed and discarded, a ritual in itself, as precise as any prayer. The stew smells faintly of rot, though no one calls it by that name. Hunger shapes the understanding of taste. Scarcity has refined the senses into unflinching endurance. When the girl peeks into the pot, she sees fragments of last week's meal, softened and unidentifiable, mingling with roots and leaves, and she imagines the lives that once nourished the flesh. This is not an act of cruelty, only the order of necessity. Each mouthful consumed is borrowed from the bones of the past. Voices rise briefly, low and cautious, as neighbors speak of a woman down the lane who has not menstruated for months. Some whisper that the gods have favored her, others that she is touched by a curse. The girl hears it all, storing each story like a seed, understanding without fully understanding, as knowledge here is passed in murmur and shadow rather than explanation. Fear and awe intermingle, shaping the community as much as any law or ritual. Superstition is not folly, it is survival. She rises and wraps a shawl around her shoulders, the wool rough against tender skin. The river waits, dark and moving under a sky smeared with clouds. She carries linen dyed with the stains of childbirth, soaked through with the presence of blood, sweat, and labor. Each piece of cloth she scrubs tells a story of life, endurance, and suffering. The water is icy, biting her hands and cheeks, but she works without pause. She imagines the blood swirling away into the current, vanishing as though carried by the saints themselves. Some part of her believes that sins dissolve as easily. Perhaps they do, perhaps they do not. She has learned not to ask which. Nearby, reeds sway in the shallow water, brushing the girl's ankles as she bends to rinse the linen. The river hums softly, a voice older than the town, carrying the distant cries of children and the low moans of the sick. The current is relentless, like the passage of time itself. She glances up to see the spires of a church through mist, and for a moment they seem to sway as if alive, breathing in rhythm with the river. Bells toll somewhere within, marking an hour she cannot name, a cadence older than memory. The kitchen is quiet when she returns. Her mother has laid the table with stale bread and thin broth, shared among the children without ceremony. They eat as one might drink water from a well, quickly, with eyes down, knowing the measure of what is allowed and what is stolen. Each mouthful is tasted for survival, not pleasure. The girl bites into her portion, noting the sour tang, the grit of crushed peas, and she swallows it with the patience that the world demands. Her younger brother watches her, eyes wide, the absence of complaint a fragile shield against hunger. Afternoon brings new duties, each one ritualized, each one necessary. She tends the animals, careful to avoid the mud-caked hooves of goats that stomp impatiently. The smell of dung clings to her skirts, heavy and familiar, a testament to the persistence of life amid decay. She feeds the chickens, noting the way their feathers catch the light, glossy and uneven. Shadows moving in feathers as if echoing wings trapped between worlds. She is aware of the world's imperfections, but also of its beauty, fleeting and subtle, even in the most grotesque forms. A friar arrives, his breath thick with the remnants of ale, the robes of his order swaying as he moves down the lane. His presence brings an unease that has been cultivated over years. He speaks of sin and hell, of fires that lick the flesh of those who stray, his voice rising and falling like a bell whose toll cannot be ignored. Children gather to listen, absorbing terror with a quiet seriousness reserved for sacred texts. She watches her eyes widen, and a strange mixture of fear and fascination settles in her chest. In his words, she hears both salvation and doom. They are inseparable. Evening descends with a chill that presses against her skin. She lights a small lamp, the smoke curling in lazy spirals, illuminating the small kitchen with trembling light. The stew has been eaten, leaving only the faintest stain on the wooden table, a memory of sustenance. She kneels and murmurs a short prayer over the remnants of the day, asking for protection from illness, from misfortune, from the invisible hand of fate that guides and punishes alike. Her prayer is unpolished, a mixture of Latin syllables and whispered pleas, but it is sincere. In this household, faith is not an adornment. It is a lifeline. She lays out straw for the children to sleep upon, the rough surface offering little comfort. They lie close together, warmth pressed against warmth, bodies curling as if to stave off both cold and fear. She moves among them, tucking arms and legs into the folds of blankets that are thin, worn, and frayed. Her hands linger on the youngest cheek, pressing lightly, not for warmth but for reassurance. The room smells of sweat, of damp wool, and a faint smoke, the combined perfume of survival. The night is alive with sounds that are ordinary yet unnerving. The scuttle of rats behind the walls, the cough of a child unsettled by dreams, the distant barking of dogs that serve more as warning than protection. She listens to each, cataloging them as one might count stars in a cloudy sky. Sleep is not immediate. It is negotiated. Arrive it slowly, a concession rather than an act of surrender. The body and mind must align, and in this world, they rarely do so without protest. Dreams are sharp and fleeting. She sees the river again, swirling red with the memory of the linen she washed. The friar's words echo through the mist, flames licking at the edges of her vision. She walks among the animals she fed, their eyes luminous in the half-light, their forms exaggerated by the dream. Each figure is a symbol, a warning, or a fragment of understanding she cannot yet name. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and iron, and even as she sleeps, she tastes it on her tongue, grounding her in the world she cannot escape. Morning will come as it always does. The key will turn, the smoke will rise from the hearth, the river will carry away stains and sins alike. The girl will rise again, bending to the labor of her small hands, learning lessons written in toil and survival. Blood, dirt, sweat, and fear are as much part of education as any text or teacher. Each act is a repetition, a ritual, a small endurance of the body and the spirit. And yet, in the midst of this stark reality, there is a strange beauty. The smell of baking bread, the shimmer of water in a trough, the warmth pressed into her palm by another human being. These are ephemeral, fleeting, yet they anchor her. They are reminders that life, even in its harshest forms, is woven with threads of tenderness and resilience. She closes her eyes for a moment, listening to the household settling, the scuttle of rats, the creak of timber, the quiet breathing of those around her. She inhales deeply, drawing the smell of smoke and sweat, the faint tang of milk and blood. It is a perfume she knows intimately, one that carries memory and warning in equal measure. The world may be cruel, unforgiving, unrelenting, but it is also hers to navigate, step by step, day by day. Sleep arrives eventually, heavy and laden with the weight of lived experience. The girl dreams of water, of fire, of hands pressed to hair and flesh and earth. She dreams of voices, low and urgent, whispering warnings and blessings, shaping her understanding of what it means to live, to endure, to survive. And when she wakes, she will rise again, guided by the same rituals, the same labor, the same vigilance, ready to meet the day not with hope, but with the steady, quiet resolve of those who know the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. Fog hangs low over the fields, heavy and damp, clinging to the blades of grass as if reluctant to release the earth to the day. The man steps forward, boots sinking slightly into the frost-hardened soil, breath curling into the air in pale plumes. The ox before him snorts, its warm breath mingling with the mist, and he murmurs to it in a mix of Norman French and the local dialect, a cadence more soothing than command. The plow is wooden, its iron share sharpened, a simple yet ruthless instrument that slices through the soil, revealing what has been buried and forgotten. Each furrow turns up worms, stones, and sometimes the brittle fragments of bones from older graves. He does not flinch. The earth is generous in memory, and he is long accustomed to its reminders. His hands are raw from labor, fingers cracked and red, knuckles dusted with dirt that will not wash away with simple water. The bread he eats is coarse, made from grain stretched thin, sometimes mixed with ground peas or even chalk. Hunger has taught him not to care for texture, only for substance. His teeth ache from years of chewing this unyielding food, one blackened tooth throbbing relentlessly. He will endure it until evening, when his wife, patient and grim, may extract it with string and a quick yank. There is no healer for such minor torments, only persistence, pain, and faith that suffering itself may earn small favor in the eyes of God. Midday brings little respite. He breaks bread with a man marked by sores, the disease whispered of in cautious tones. Leprosy. The town does not exile such men, nor do they embrace them openly. Charity and fear intertwine. He hands over a portion of his meal, careful not to touch infected skin. The other man bows his head, grateful but silent, understanding that sustenance carries with it both survival and risk. In these small, everyday acts, the measure of faith in humanity is found, not in sermons or prayers, but in bread broken and shared with trembling hands. The bell tolls, a hollow, metallic sound rolling across the fields, marking an hour that belongs neither to him nor the ox, but to God and the Lord alike. Time is a blade cutting through labor, illness, and hunger. He crosses himself without thought, repeating a gesture learned in childhood, one of many acts performed out of habit, out of obedience, or out of hope that repetition itself may ward off misfortune. In the afternoon, the pig is slaughtered behind the house. Its squeal pierces the quiet, a shrill testament to the brevity of life. Blood is collected in a bowl for sausages, entrails salted or boiled for broth. Nothing is wasted. The smell of iron and fur lingers in the air, sticking to clothes, hair, and skin. The children watch, some turning away, some mesmerized, learning that death is not a spectacle but an ingredient in daily survival. The man wipes his hands on a rag, the red still visible, a mark of participation in the endless cycle of life taken and life preserved. The land does not forgive laziness. The plow awaits its return, the ox tired but willing. He leads it along the furrows again, murmuring, coaxing, guiding. The soil clings to his boots, a mixture of wet earth and decomposed leaves. Each step, each motion, is a negotiation with the land, a dance between endurance and necessity. The sweat stings his eyes, mixes with the fine dust of soil, and runs down into the hollows of his chest. Hunger is gnawing but deferred. Thirst is manageable, water drawn from the well, iron tainted and cold, but enough to prevent collapse. Life is measured in cycles of labor and survival, each day a repetition of the one before, each task a testament to resilience. By late afternoon, he checks the traps set near the edge of the woods. Rabbits, foxes, and the occasional hare, caught for the table or for barter. The snares are simple: twisted cord, sharpened sticks, patience. Each animal that falls is a story of life ended, another meal secured. He disposes of the bodies with care, ensuring the meat is clean, skinning with the skill inherited from his father and his father before him. The bones piled aside may serve the village in many ways: fertilizer, tools, or fodder for future generations. Even death has purpose. Waste is sin in a world that asks for everything. As dusk approaches, the man washes his hands in cold water drawn from the well. The redness from earlier labor swirls away, leaving only faint stains and the memory of blood's weight. He kneels briefly in the doorway, hands pressed together in a gesture learned long ago, reciting a short prayer for the living and the dead alike. There is no grand eloquence, only sincerity. The day has been survived. The ritual is to acknowledge this fact, to pay homage to endurance and to the unseen forces that shape life and death alike. Night arrives swiftly, draping the village in shadows. The stars are faint, swallowed by cloud, and the wind moves through the streets with a whispering persistence. Doors are barred, animals settle into their pens. Fires, low and carefully banked, cast flickering shadows that dance along the walls, creating forms that resemble wings, chains, and ancient sigils. The man sits by the hearth, a piece of stale bread in hand, tasting its bitterness, reflecting on the hours that have passed. Each ache, each scar, each minor torment is remembered with clarity. These are the markers of life, as sacred in their ordinariness as the mass, the bell, or the cycle of planting and harvest. Sleep comes unevenly. He lies on a mattress of straw, bundled in rough cloths, listening to the sound of the night, the scuttle of rats behind walls, the groan of timber settling, the occasional call from a neighbor, the whisper of wind through gaps in the roof. His dreams are stitched from the day's labors. He sees the ox pulling the plow across endless furrows, the child bled at the hands of the barber, the pig in its final, sharp-voiced moment. Each image is tinged with a sense of earth, blood, sweat, and smoke, woven together into a tapestry that is at once disturbing and necessary. It is not fear that haunts him, nor sorrow alone, but the profound, quiet realization that life is inseparable from these small violences, these rituals of endurance. In the silence before dawn, he recalls the bread shared, the hands wiped clean, the prayers muttered with lips chapped by cold. Life is a sequence of acts performed for survival, for faith, for the faint hope of favor from God. Each furrow turned in the soil, Each animal slaughtered, each child comforted or disciplined, is a thread in a fabric too complex to see in its entirety. Yet he feels it, the weight of existence pressing evenly upon shoulders worn by labor and time. Morning will come again, as it always does. The fog will return to sweep over the fields, curling in long fingers over the broken soil and the remnants of graves. The ox will stir, snorting, impatient for the plow to be set in motion. The bread will be coarse and the water cold, and still he will rise to meet the day, carrying the rhythm of survival in every motion. Pain and endurance, death and labor, hunger and faith, they are inseparable as breath and heartbeat. The man closes his eyes in the faint lamplight of his dwelling, feeling the ache in his back and shoulders, tasting the iron of sweat on his tongue. Outside, the wind presses against the timbers like a persistent question, and he answers only with the quiet, deliberate movements of someone who knows that life demands more than hope. It demands steadfastness, observation, and the courage to endure what others would call cruel or disturbing. In this world, the disturbing is ordinary, and the ordinary is sacred. To live is to navigate these truths with care, precision, and an almost imperceptible reverence for what must be done to survive. Sleep finally claims him, but it is not escape. It is a continuation, a soft echo of the day's labor, a meditation upon the threads of endurance that weave the human soul into the fabric of the world. And when the first key turns in the dawn, when frost-laden boots meet soil again, he will rise. The furrows await him, the plow waits for the ox, and the day, full of hardship, pain, and the strange, quiet beauty of survival, will begin anew. Within the monastery's stone walls, dawn is not heralded by light, but by habit. The novice rises before the bell, guided more by muscle memory than awareness, the cold seeping into his bones as if the stones themselves have absorbed centuries of discipline. His habit, rough and unyielding, clings to his skin, a reminder of vows that weigh heavier than lead. Silence dominates the corridors, a living presence that presses upon the chest, curbing thought and movement alike. Not a single word is spoken. To break it is to fracture the fragile rhythm of life here. Every sound, from the scrape of a sandal on stone to the distant drip of water, carries meaning, either as instruction or admonition. He moves to the scriptorium, where the air is dense with dust and pigment. Mineral powders, ground into fine dust, hang in the light like spectral clouds, settling into lungs with quiet insistence. He dips the quill into ink black as night. Each stroke deliberate, each letter an act of devotion. Mistakes are carved away with a knife, leaving scars in parchment, reminders of human fallibility. The texts themselves, prayers, psalms, and lives of saints, are recited and copied with near ritual precision. The words may be incomprehensible, yet they hold weight, a bridge between mortal effort and divine order. Lead white, lapis lazuli, and verdigris stain his fingers and hands, and he inhales these substances almost unknowingly, letting them merge with his being. Poisonous though they may be, the novice is unaware. The sacred task shields him from thought of consequence. The midday bell calls all to refectory, and he moves with the others in silence. Hunger is a lesson here, framed as a step toward holiness, a tool to discipline the flesh. The bread is coarse, water drawn from the well thinned with sediment, yet it is eaten with gratitude. Starvation is not cruel in these walls. It is transformative. Saints have starved before him. Martyrs have fasted until the world itself seemed to narrow to a point of piercing light. He chews slowly, mind wandering over the faces of those who have endured before, absorbing their perseverance as a quiet template for his own. Tasks continue after the meal. The novice is sent to tend to the sick and dying who arrive at the monastery gate, pilgrims and paupers alike. One man has a wound festering with maggots, the elder monk explaining matter-of-factly that these creatures are God's cleaners, consuming what is rotten so that decay does not spread. The novice's stomach twists, but he does not look away. He follows instructions with trembling hands, swabbing, cleaning, binding. The smell of rot is thick, clinging to his habit, his hair, his skin. He prays silently for the man, for the maggots, for himself, though he is unsure whether God hears any of it. This work is not merely hygiene. It is a meditation on mortality, a tactile reminder of the frailty of flesh. The afternoon drags on a rhythm, both exhausting and numinous. He copies more texts, their letters forming perfect lines that curve and bend according to rules older than he can comprehend. Each stroke is an echo of devotion, an imprint of time's continuity. He pauses occasionally to sharpen the quill or stir the ink, aware that even the smallest acts are part of the larger weave of monastic life. The walls themselves seem alive, breathing with the accumulated prayers, confessions, and labors of generations. Every stone has absorbed sound, smell, and touch. Every shadow carries a history of whispered faith and quiet suffering. At the cloister, the novice walks the stone path, the wind carrying the scent of cold earth, wet wool, and distant pine. He passes fellow monks, each absorbed in their own silent journeys, their eyes downcast, their faces serene yet stern. Conversation is scarce, and when it occurs, it is measured, precise, often in Latin or the clipped vernacular monastic instruction. Words are tools and weapons, wielded sparingly, reserved for necessity and clarity. The garden is tended methodically, herbs, vegetables, and flowers arranged for both utility and symbolic meaning. Rosemary for remembrance, sage for purification, rue for penitence. He prunes, waters, weeds. Every action an offering, every gesture part of the sacred order that governs life within these walls. Evening comes with procession of shadows. Candles flicker against the walls, the flame casting grotesque, almost living shapes. The novice moves among them, performing ritual tasks, arranging the lamps, preparing the chapel, laying out the sacred vessels. The light bends and stretches, transforming familiar objects into forms that seem to breathe, to shift with the slow rhythm of the day's end. Silence deepens, now heavy with accumulated hours, a presence that presses against the body, shaping posture and thought alike. The novice feels in his chest, in the careful positioning of his hands, in the slow, measured steps he takes along the flagstones. Night prayers call him to the chapel, where the air is thick with incense and devotion. He kneels, hands folded, lips moving in whispers he barely understands. The chant rises and falls, each note stretching into stone arches, vibrating in a resonance that seems older than the monastery itself. He senses the presence of those who came before, their voices mingling with his own, the walls absorbing the devotion, the toil, the quiet suffering of centuries. He prays for guidance, for protection, for endurance. He prays for the understanding that comes only through long repetition, through the patient imitation of those who have walked this path before. The novice retires to his narrow bed, straw beneath him pressed flat by countless nights of meditation and fatigue. He lies awake, aware of the subtle shift in the air, the soft groan of timber, the faint scratching of rodents behind walls. Sleep is tentative, not a relief but a continuation of vigilance. Dreams arrive as fragments, an open book, the sting of pigment on the skin, the maggots moving in the wound of the sick man, the flicker of candlelight across the stone walls. Every image carries both warning and lesson, an invitation to endurance, patience, and reflection. In sleep, as in waking, he is taught to observe, to absorb, to carry the weight of knowledge and ritual as faithfully as he carries his habit. The night stretches, long and unyielding. Stars pierce the darkness beyond the high windows, indifferent witnesses to the labors and prayers below. Somewhere in the monastery, a bell tolls softly, marking the hours with unerring precision. The novice counts the tolls, each one a marker of time passing, of the body enduring, of the soul learning its place within the ordered universe. He is aware, in a way that is almost painful, of the fragility of life, the inevitability of pain, and the subtle, pervasive beauty of devotion. Everything within these walls, the cold stones, the rough wood, the ink-stained hands, the sick and dying, the shadows cast by candlelight, is a testament to endurance, to ritual, to the human capacity to find meaning even amidst suffering. By the small hours, the novice drifts into a restless sleep, the echo of the day lingering in his chest. He dreams of quills scratching across parchment, of wounds cleansed with maggots, of candles burning low, their smoke curling toward the high ceiling. The air in his dreams is thick with incense, the faint metallic tang of ink, the earthy smell of damp stone. Even here in sleep he is immersed in the rhythm of monastery life, learning lessons that are unspoken, unrecorded, yet etched into the sinews of his body and the marrow of his bones. Morning will come again, as it always does, with its habitual rigor, its quiet demands, its relentless devotion. The novice will rise before the bell, guided by muscle memory and reverence, stepping into the same cycle that shapes and defines him. He will grind pigments, copy texts, tend the sick, walk the cloisters, pray the hours, and lie awake at night, listening to the silence, the wind, the faint scurrying of unseen creatures. Each act is both ordinary and sacred, both mundane and profound. In the rhythm of repetition, in the discipline of endurance, the novice finds a strange, unsettling beauty of a life devoted to something larger than himself, a life where pain, labor, observation, and ritual converge into meaning, into survival, into grace. The narrow street is thick with the smell of lime and decay even before the first light of dawn touches the timber houses. The village has been stirred awake by routine, yet the air is heavy with anticipation and unease. At the far end, the burial pit is being opened once more. Earth is turned with careful hands, shovels scraping and groaning against soil that has absorbed centuries of the living and the dead alike. The pit has been used many times, and still it is deemed insufficient. Space is a luxury, a commodity paid for in coins and prayers. A woman approaches, clutching a small wooden token etched with her husband's name, a token purchased with the last of her savings. The wood is worn smooth from handling, a tactile memory of loss and obligation. She watches as grave diggers begin to move the bones from older burials aside, stacking them neatly like firewood. There is no ceremony, no lamentation. The bones are inert, familiar, necessary. Death here is practical, and familiarity is the currency with which the living pay their grief. The pit's odor is sharp and earthy, a mixture of turned soil, decay, and lime meant to mask the unmistakable presence of what has been long buried. The woman covers her nose with the edge of her cloak, but the scent permeates, settling into her hair, her sleeves, her lungs. She stands silently, observing, aware that the ritual of opening graves is as ordinary as the act of rising from bed each morning. Here, life and death are sewn together in a seamless tapestry, one that is difficult to separate, even in thought. The body to be interred is brought forward, wrapped quickly in linen salted to preserve it from the inevitable decay. The flesh is pale, the hands stiffen into unnatural angles by rigor mortis. Children peek from doorways, curiosity untempered by fear. They have seen this before. They will see it again. Mortality is instruction, delivered daily, taught through repetition rather than explanation. The woman watches them, understanding that these small eyes are learning how the world operates, that life is fleeting, that bodies are temporary vessels, and that death is a labor performed with care and efficiency. The grave diggers finish their work, the corpse lowered into the shallow earth with the same precision given to stacking firewood. The woman steps back, letting the ritual conclude, feeling the weight of inevitability pressing down upon her shoulders. She thinks of her husband, of the future that might come for her children, and wonders whether the coin she paid ensures merely space or some measure of mercy. She brushes dust from her cloak and walks slowly back to her house, the muted sounds of the village following her, the scrape of carts, the bleating of goats, the faint wail of someone who has not yet accepted loss. By mid-morning, life resumes with unsettling normality. The market square is a riot of smells, colors, and sounds. Eels wriggle in shallow tubs, their slick bodies slapping against wooden tables. The butcher stall is nearby, red and copper with fresh cuts, while a tooth puller advertises relief with stained apron and iron tools. Pain is public here. A man grips the bench as a tooth is torn free. His scream is absorbed into the general cacophony, swallowed by the indifference of a world that recognizes endurance as a virtue. The woman watches, her jaw set, her hands clenched, understanding that suffering is woven into the daily fabric of life. No one seeks to hide it. No one offers comfort beyond what is earned through personal resilience. Afternoon brings domestic labor. She returns home to scrub the floor, using a mixture of water and urine, a common antiseptic that bites at the skin and overwhelms the senses. The ammonia stings her hands and nostrils, yet she works diligently, aware that cleanliness is both necessity and ritual. Each sweep of the brush, each bucket poured, is an act of defiance against decay, a small attempt to impose order on a world steeped in mortality. She prays quietly as she works, whispering the names of saints learned long ago, asking for protection from illnesses that move silently through air, water, and touch. The prayers are not eloquent, yet they carry conviction born of repetition and the instinct to survive. The evening light fades into a muted glow, dust motes swirling in remaining sunbeams as the village settles. Fires are lit in homes, smoke curling upward, lingering in the cool air. Children are fed, animals tended, and doors bar against both human and animal intrusion. The woman moves among her household, ensuring warmth and sustenance, her movements careful and deliberate. Every action carries weight, each gesture a bridge between necessity and protection, between life and inevitable encroachment of death. At twilight, she pauses by the window, looking down the street where the burial pit lies quiet once more. Shadows stretch across the ground, elongated and distorted, as if the day itself has been pulled thin and stretched to meet the night. The bones beneath the earth are layered close, a reminder of both the temporality and the persistence of life. Each body is a lesson, each grave a symbol of endurance, of obligation, and of the small mercies afforded to those who remain. She feels the tension between fragility and resilience, understanding that survival is an act of negotiation with forces far larger than any single life. Night brings a fragile calm. The woman prepares the household for sleep, ensuring the children are tucked into straw-laden beds, blankets thin and worn. The animals settle in their pens, breathing in the warmth of bodies pressed close together. The air is thick with the smells of earth, smoke, and cooking remnants, mingling with the latent tang of decay that drifts from the burial pit. Sleep is approached cautiously, as a temporary reprieve rather than a surrender. Darkness is not kind. It is watchful, patient, a force that mirrors the vigilance of those who walk the boundary between life and death each day. As she lies down herself, the woman reflects upon the rituals that have governed her day. The opening of graves, the handling of corpses, the scrubbing of floors with urine, the witnessing of pain. These are not extraordinary acts, yet they leave an indelible mark upon the soul. The disturbing and the mundane exist side by side, inseparable. To live is to acknowledge and endure them, to fold them into the rhythm of existence until the lines between horror and necessity blur, and all that remains is the steady cadence of survival. Sleep comes, heavy with memory and anticipation. Dreams mingle the odors of lime, smoke, and wet earth. She sees the graves, the lined bodies, the children watching with unflinching eyes. She hears the slap of eel on wood, the scream of the man at the tooth puller's bench, the quiet prayers of the household. Each sound, each smell, each image is woven into her subconscious, teaching lessons she may not yet name, preparing her for the repetition of life's harsh patterns. Even in slumber, the rituals of endurance continue, threading through her consciousness, linking past, present, and inevitable future. Morning will arrive as it always does. The pit will be open again, the bones moved aside, the living and the dead entwined in a cycle that refuses pause. The market will awaken, the cries of vendors and animals will fill the air, and the woman will rise to meet the day with quiet determination. She will perform the same tasks, witness the same minor cruelties, and negotiate survival in the only way she has learned, with care, vigilance, and a steadfast acceptance of life's ordinary horrors. In this repetition, she finds both resignation and quiet triumph, the acknowledgement that endurance itself is sacred, and that every small act of survival is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The night deepens, and the village rests wrapped in the uneasy peace of routine. Fires flicker in windows, smoke drifts lazily through the timbered streets, and animals stir in pens, a course of life continuing alongside death. The woman lies awake for a moment longer, listening to the soft rustle of straw, the distant footsteps of a neighbor, the muted sigh of the earth as it settles. She breathes in deeply, drawing a sense of smoke, sweat, and lingering decay into her lungs. This is her world, defined not by beauty or comfort, but by the careful management of life and death, by the rituals that sustain both the living and the memory of the departed. In these quiet hours, she understands the truth of existence in her village. The disturbing is ordinary, the ordinary is sacred, and life is a fragile, ongoing negotiation with forces larger than herself. To endure, to act with diligence and care, to witness without collapse, this is a measure worth. And when the dawn returns, bringing with it the scent of lime and turned soil, she will rise again, performing the same tasks, observing the same rituals, and living within a rhythm that has defined her world for as long as memory allows. Night gathers around the timber house like a cloak drawn tight, the wind threading through the cracks and gaps as if it carries messages from the world outside. The family moves with quiet urgency, tending to small rituals learned over years of hardship. The fire in the hearth is coaxed carefully, embers stirred and banked with gentle hands, coaxing warmth without risking the destruction that flames might bring. Fire here is servant and threat alike, respected with a reverence born from experience. Sparks leap lazily into the air, briefly illuminated before vanishing into smoke, carrying the faint scent of burnt tallow and charred wood. The room is dim, illuminated only by this flickering light, and yet it is enough to see the contours of faces, the gleam in eyes, the subtle gestures that mark care and attentiveness. The youngest child lies feverish in a corner, limbs curled, small chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. The mother presses a relic against the child's chest, a small fragment of bone encased in cloth, said it belonged to a saint. The weight of belief rests heavy in her hand, a bridge between the mortal and the divine, between hope and fear. She murmurs prayers, half-understood Latin phrases, and the rhythm of her voice steadies the child. Medicine here is entwined with faith, each syllable carrying the promise of protection, each touch an offering to unseen forces. When the fever burns hot beneath her palm, she bites back a sob, guilt blossoming like a dark flower. Has she sinned, or is a child suffering merely part of the invisible order that governs life and death? The answer is unknowable, yet the act of care persists, unwavering. Outside, the night watch moves along the streets, lanterns bobbing like captive stars. Their calls mark the hours, rough voices penetrating the wind, carving a rhythm into the darkness. Though thieves, predators, and worse still stalk unseen paths, the villagers find comfort in this fragile order. Doors are barred, latches drawn tight, not for comfort but for necessity. Sleep here is cautious, an exercise in vigilance as much as rest. Each creak of timber, each whisper of wind, each faint scuttle in the shadows is catalogued and remembered, part of an unspoken ledger of survival. In the corner of the room waits a chamber pot, its contents to be emptied with morning light into the street. The odor is sharp, familiar, a reminder of the intimate and unglamorous realities of life. Fleas stir in the straw bedding, drawn by the warmth of bodies pressed together. Hands move automatically, scratching and adjusting, negotiating comfort and irritation in a ritual older than memory. Hygiene is both necessary and ritualistic, an acknowledgement of the fragility of human flesh in a world rife with disease. Urine, ash, and water are tools as much as prayers and charms, each serving its purpose in the quiet struggle against decay. The family moves together in small, deliberate patterns. The mother checks the fire, ensuring it will not die in the night. The father inspects the door, tightening the latch against unseen threats. The older children are gathered close to the youngest, warmth pressed to warmth, bodies curled to fend off cold. Each movement is imbued with care, necessity, and a profound awareness of mortality. The smells of the room, smoke, damp straw, cooking remnants, blend with the faint scent of fever and sweat, creating a tapestry of life, labor, and vigilance. The night is alive with these small details, ordinary yet charged with the weight of survival. The mother moves to the window, peering out into the night, lantern light flickering over her face. She sees shadows stretching along the street, shapes that might be human, might be animal, might be neither. The darkness is alive, patient, and indifferent, pressing against the house as if testing its defenses. She inhales the cold air, smelling the frosty earth, the faint hint of smoke from distant hearths. These scents anchor her, reminding her that she exists, that her family exists, and that the world continues despite its harshness. In these moments, she feels both the fragility and resilience of life, a delicate balance maintained by care, vigilance, and ritual. Before lying down, the family kneels together, murmuring prayers learned long before comprehension. Words of protection, endurance, and blessing are spoken over bodies, over the home, over the uncertain night. The cadence is familiar, rhythmic, comforting in its predictability. The smoke from the fire curls upward, mingling with the whispered Latin, carrying the prayers into rafters, into the walls. into the night. The act itself is sacred, a bridge between mortality and faith, a ritual that transforms fear into purpose, vulnerability into vigilance. The youngest child shifts restlessly, fever burning hotter, and the mother's hand hovers over him, warm and steady. She whispers words of protection, recalling the saints' lives, their endurance, their miracles. The child's breathing eases, momentarily soothed by the presence, the ritual, the insistence of care. Here, in the interstices of fear and devotion, life is nurtured against the encroachment of disease and death. Every gesture, no matter how small, carries significance. A touch, a prayer, a whispered reassurance. Each is an act of resistance against the inevitable, a claim to survival, however tenuous. Sleep approaches, heavy with exhaustion and the weight of unspoken worries. The family lies together on straw-laden beds, bodies pressed close against the cold, seeking warmth and proximity. The flicker of the fire casts long, dancing shadows on the timber walls, transforming familiar shapes into phantoms that watch silently. The wind moves outside, threading through gaps, carrying the faint sound of the village, a dog barking, the scrape of a cart, the distant cry of a child. Even in sleep, the rhythms of life continue, the rituals of vigilance never fully relinquished. The mother closes her eyes, listening to the breathing of her children, the faint scuttling of pests, the gentle crackle of the dying embers. Her thoughts drift to the day that has passed, to the labor completed, to the care administered. She recalls the smells, the textures, the small acts that ensured survival. She knows that tomorrow will demand the same diligence. The fire stoked, the door secured, the children tended, the rituals repeated with precision. There is no reprieve, no pause, only the steady rhythm of life in a world that offers no guarantees. The night stretches long and unyielding, yet within it lies a fragile sanctuary. The flickering fire, the whispered prayers, the warmth of bodies pressed together. These are defiance against the indifference of the dark, the uncertainty of illness, the ever-present specter of death. Each act of care, each gesture of vigilance, each whispered word carries weight, shaping the family's existence, binding them together, and asserting life against the harsh reality outside their walls. Dawn will arrive as it always does, bringing with it the cold, the wind, the demands of survival. The mother will rise again, tending the hearth, the children, the smallest details that ensure endurance. The family will perform the same rituals, witness the same dangers, navigate the same uncertainties. Each repetition is a testament to resilience, a declaration that life persists, that care endures, that faith, however tentative, remains. In these ordinary, disciplined practices, the sacred and the disturbing intertwine, shaping a world where survival is itself a form of grace. Sleep finally comes, heavy and laden with memory, with anticipation, with the faint hope that the rituals of the night have shielded them adequately. Dreams mingle the sense of smoke, damp straw, and fevered flesh with visions of saints, a protection of endurance. Even in slumber, the family continues their quiet, relentless negotiation with mortality, illness, and the dark. And when the first light of dawn pierces the timbers, they will rise again, carrying the same vigilance, the same care, the same devotion into the day, ready to meet the ordinary horrors of life with quiet, unflinching endurance. The dawn light barely reaches the narrow alleyways of the medieval town, spilling weakly over the uneven cobblestones, slick with frost and refuse. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the bitter scent of burnt peat and tallow, mingling with the stench of waste left from the night. A figure moves quietly along this passage, shoulders hunched against the chill, hands clutching a bundle wrapped in coarse cloth. The bundle contained the offerings of the poor, a few coins, scraps of bread, and a piece of cured meat, the meager gift intended to appease the local apothecary, healer, and perhaps the unseen powers that govern survival in this fragile place. Each step is measured, careful, aware that danger lurks not only in strangers but in every unseen corner, a loose stone, a rodent, the shadow of a man waiting to steal. The apothecary shop is little more than a wooden stall beside a wall darkened by years of smoke and rain. The door creaks as it opens, revealing shelves lined with jars of powders, dried herbs, and strange roots. The air is pungent, a mixture of pungent spices, rotting vegetation, and the sharp metallic tang of iron. The woman behind the counter moves with precision, her hands steady despite the chaos of small animals, mice and rats, scuttling along the edges of the room, searching for crumbs. She greets the visitor with a nod, her eyes sharp, assessing both the coins and the pulse of the one seeking help. Illness is not rare, but remedies are not generous. Healing here is barter, a transaction, a ritual where the boundaries of mercy and necessity are blurred. The figure unwraps the bundle carefully, revealing the small offerings. The apothecary weighs the coins in her palm, examines the food, and murmurs instructions in a mix of the vernacular and Latin phrases that have the weight of ritual. Herbs are measured, crushed, and boiled with the precision of liturgy. The scent of chamomile, sage, and wormwood rise in curling wisps, mingling with the heavier odors of the shop. A poultice is prepared, wrapped in linen, and pressed into trembling hands. Instruction is given for application, whispered in careful tones that echo with both authority and fear. Healing is both practical and sacred, performed with reverence for the body and the unseen forces that govern life and death. Outside, the town awakens further. Children run along narrow streets, their feet slapping cobblestones, skirts and tunics catching on stones and splinters. Women carry water in buckets, their skirts damp and smelling faintly of clay and river, the rope handles rough against their palms. The clatter of carts brings a constant rhythm, a percussion that underscores the ordinary brutality of life. Deliveries, markets, the hauling of waste, the movement of goods both edible and perishable. Everything is marked by labor, by survival, by the constant negotiation between scarcity and necessity. The air is alive with sound, with odor, with the muted terror of a world where disease, hunger, and human cruelty are ever present. A beggar approaches the apothecary, coughing harshly, the hand pressed to a chest already scarred by previous illness. She receives no pity, only instruction, only measured action. A spoonful of bitter liquid, tinctures of herbs, and a whispered warning. Administer twice daily. Avoid indulgence. Pray. Illness is punishment, misfortune, or a trial. Mercy is conditional. The beggar leaves, limping, the bitter scent of the remedy clinging to his breath, mingling with the stench of the street. Survival is never simple. It is an intricate ritual of observation, endurance, and constant negotiation with forces both seen and unseen. Midday brings the tolling of the bell from the church tower, its sonorous chime cutting through the murk and the noise. People pause for a moment, heads bowed, hands pressed together, a silent acknowledgement of higher authority and fragile mortality. The sound carries across the rooftops, drawing the living and the dead together in rhythm, if not in sentiment. The bell marks not merely time, but accountability, for action, for survival, for the small mercies granted or withheld. Each toll is a reminder that life here is governed by ritual, by repetition, and by adherence to forces that are invisible yet omnipresent. In the afternoon, a small child falls ill near the marketplace. Parents bring her to a healer known for both skill and superstition, for here the line between medicine and magic is thin. The child's skin is pale, lips tinged with blue, eyes glassy with fever. The healer examines her quickly, smelling her breath, pressing fingers against pulse points, listening for wheezes and coughs. Remedies are swift and tactile. Crushed herbs applied to the skin, bitter draughts forced through trembling lips, prayers muttered under breath. Observation is key. Each symptom, each twitch, each cry carries meaning beyond immediate comprehension. The healer's hands move with both compassion and efficiency, trained to administer both cure and ritual in equal measure. Death is never far. Survival is negotiated, delicate, and precarious. By evening, the streets empty gradually, leaving shadows long and insistent. Fires are lit behind doors, smoke rising lazily into the night. Windows are shuttered and the sound of animals, dogs, pigs, cats, fill the quiet corners. Families huddle together, the weight of survival pressing heavily upon them. Children listen to whispered tales of saints, of punishments for sins, of miracles achieved in small, hidden acts. The tales serve as both instruction and warning, shaping perception and action. Fear and reverence coexist, guiding behavior in a world where a single misstep may mean illness, starvation, or worse. In one small house, a family tends a fire that sputters and pops, Careful to coax warmth without consuming the precious fuel too quickly. The mother prepares a meager supper, bread moistened in broth, vegetables boiled until soft, a thin slice of cured meat stretched across the table. Each movement is deliberate. Slices cut, spoons ladled, portions measured. The meal is survival, ritualized by habit and underscored by the constant awareness of scarcity. The air is thick with the smells of cooking, sweat, and lingering smoke, a sensory testament to endurance and continuity. Night deepens. The family retires to straw-stuffed beds, bodies pressed together for warmth. The room is alive with small movements. The shift of a child's limb, the scratch of flea against skin, the soft sigh of exhaustion. Shadows dance along the walls, flickering from the dying embers of the fire. The family murmurs prayers together, words learned in childhood, phrases that carry both hope and the weight of tradition. These rituals, repeated nightly, form a bulwark against fear, a fragile shield in a world of disease, death, and unpredictability. Even in sleep, the senses remain alert. The smell of smoke, the metallic tang of coins, the faint rot refuse carried on the wind. These are etched into consciousness. Dreams are populated with images of the market, the healer, the sick child, and the ritual of survival that threads through every action. Each vision is a lesson, a meditation, a rehearsal of endurance and observation, life and death, health and illness, order and chaos. These forces intermingle in the mind, shaping perception, guiding action, and imprinting a rhythm that governs waking hours as surely as the tolling of the church bell. Morning will come once again, as relentless as the river flowing beyond the village walls. The apothecary will weigh her powders, the bell will toll, the children will wake, and families will negotiate survival in the streets and homes. The disturbing and the ordinary are inseparable here. Each breath, each gesture, each small act of care or vigilance carries the weight of mortality and faith. The town exists in a delicate balance, sustained by ritual, observation, and enduring resilience born of necessity. And when dawn finally pierces the mist, it will bring with it the same harsh light, the same demands, and the same fragile hope that life, despite its precariousness, continues. In the stillness before dawn, the town sleeps fitfully, wrapped in blankets thin and worn, warmed by bodies pressed together, and protected only by the vigilance practiced day after day. Outside, rats scuttle, wind whispers, and the faint creak of timber reminds the inhabitants that the world is never fully at rest. Even in darkness, life persists, fragile yet tenacious, sustained by the rituals, prayers, and small acts of endurance that define existence in this medieval town. The disturbing and the mundane coexist, inseparable and enduring, forming a world in which survival itself is both challenge and sacred duty.